This is Jamaal Diwan, and you're listening to the Coffee with Karim podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Coffee with Karim podcast. Don't forget to leave us a lovely review on iTunes and sponsor the show today at patreon.com. Links are in every description of every show.
The people who came before you, they didn't reach what they reached because of praying a lot and fasting a lot and giving a lot in charity. Of course, there's varying levels that people struggle with different things. That's part of spirituality, right?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karim. I am your host, Karim Sirajuddin. I am here with Imam Jamaal Diwan. He is one of the founders of the Majlis in Orange County, California. Sheikh Jamaal, pleasure to have you on the show, sir.
My pleasure. Barakallah feek.
So tell us more about the Majlis and what's the vision of this space?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question in some ways. The short story is basically that all we want to do essentially at the Majlis is to try to embody something similar to the example of the Prophet ﷺ, which I think everyone would probably say with their projects, but basically what it comes down to is trying to provide a space that's comfortable for people to engage with religious teaching, some sort of commitment to spiritual refinement, and to being with one another in companionship, and to trying to give back to the world around them. Mm-hmm. And as simple as it sounds, I think that many of our spaces, basically the idea behind the space is for it to be people-centered, right, and people-focused rather than anything else. And so everything that we do is really to bring the people together and to try to give them something that will improve them in their lives and their relationships with one another.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like an incubator to learn and live Islam, perhaps in a, I don't want to say a fresh way, but perhaps in a different way from maybe some of the common experiences that we may have had at, local masajid or stuff like that. Not to say that all masajid are not great spaces, but, there are stories, of course, right?
Spaces,
we all have them.
Every space has its limitations.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to ask you, I know you offer pastoral care providing and different types of, spiritual counsel. You teach from classical texts. And what is the difference between religion and spirituality in your opinion? It is a very common debate these days. Like people will say something like, I consider myself spiritual but not religious. Or no, there's no such thing as spirituality in Islam. It's just religion or the deen. Are those two things different, or what's your advice or feedback on that question?
Yeah. Well, I think as always, we get into the issue of what are the definitions that people are functioning with. So when someone says religion, what do they mean? When they say spirituality, what do they mean? And oftentimes, the related question to that is perhaps why do they mean what they mean? Or what's the backstory to that? I think for many people who kind of say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, I feel like a lot of that has to do with their experience with religion. Right. And they're deep down inside, they realize that there's more to life than just the material things that are around us. And they know that the great spiritual traditions of the world and religions and so on have something to offer in that regard. But oftentimes their experience with that religious thing in an organized way can be something that pushes them away. And I think that that's true for people of Christian heritage for sure. And I think it's also true for people that are from the Muslim tradition as well. Yeah.
It's like you're lost existentially. You find, let's say, a religion, and if it happens to be Islam, there's a high chance, you come in with these rosy goggles of like, wow, I read the seerah and this is the truth. I want to live, according to this. Mm-hmm. And then you go to your local masjid and there could be a very different experience. Like all of a sudden it's about, heavy emphasis on legal transactions of the religion, or, you're basically told you're not really Muslim until you change your identity fundamentally, or your culture, the way you dress, the way you talk, whatever it is, right? So what do you think is going on there?
Then people end up spiritual.
So, does that mean they just kind of like, okay, that means I'm going to take what I want and kind of make it help. Whatever I use from religion to make me feel good sometimes could be one understanding of what it means to be spiritual, perhaps. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, on the last point, I think that that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Like whatever we can take from the religion to make us feel good is being spiritual. Sometimes that could be good. I mean, we do feel good when we do spiritual things, but it's just not that those are always going to be easy. So there's a fine line there, I think. But people, we have, I think, oftentimes this tension between the ideal and the real, and we definitely experience that in the Muslim community. But I mean, we always tell people, judge Islam by what it is, not by what Muslims do.
Right.
And that's kind of like basically calling people to recognize the real versus ideal.
I saw a bumper sticker once that said, "Oh God, save me from your followers."
Yeah. It's like it's pretty good actually, right? Followers, you put it in quotes, right? Those who think they're following you.
Right.
But I think that's an ongoing challenge for people. And then, spirituality, I think, is very similar to a lot of things, which is that there's some truth about there being things greater than ourselves, greater than the material in front of us. And different places you'll find some glimpses of that truth. But the challenge is when you pick different things from different places, they don't come together in an integrated whole. And I think that's where you see a lot of difficulties here in the questions of spirituality. And in greater American society, I think you see this as a broader trend. That you see this category of people who kind of recognize that this perspective, where we've come to culturally as a people, there's something missing from it. And so you see, all types of different things, a concern for the environment, people all interested in yoga, people, as always, you have this kind of, for the last 50 years, probably 60 years, this interest in Eastern religion.
Yeah.
But you try to bring it in, and I'm going to integrate this into my life, but it doesn't always work because the rest of it is not. It's like you're taking, to use like a heavy Muslim example, you're studying fiqh without a madhab. So you have opinions from different places, but it doesn't make sense as a whole.
It's like having a steering wheel without a car.
Yeah.
Or brakes in the steering wheel, but
or like
no holistic system is what you're kind of saying. Is
like I really want a Mercedes, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a Mercedes logo symbol off someone else's car. I'm gonna put it on my car,
right?
And now I'm gonna feel like I have a Mercedes, but you don't have a Mercedes. The inside is still not the same.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So what I'm hearing you say is labels or personal assignment to a tradition or practice or religion, naturally that's your starting point. And it's also the point that can help you, let's say, correct or harmonize your very perception with, what is meant to be the truth or the path of that religion or tradition or philosophy, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that... I don't know if I'm understanding exactly what you're saying right, but I think that, for example, one of our teachers used to tell us, if you want to become a really good poet, the first thing you do is you memorize poetry. And after you've memorized enough poetry, you get to a point where you're able to actually independently contribute to the world of poetry.
I can relate to that because I know the more songs I learned on guitar, the more I was able to write better songs.
And I think that that's true for other things too. So, for example, I want to have some sort of... You would see it actually in the books of law, again, and like a Sharia side of things, is that people would choose a madhab. They study their school of interpretation. And it's once they reach a high level in their school of interpretation that now they start to question some of the conclusions of their school.
Right.
Or how it applies to the evidences and so on and so forth.
Right.
But there has to be some level of disciplining in the training that gets it. And maybe that's related to spirituality too, because... I believe that part of spirituality is gaining the almost like a base level of it is gaining some sort of discipline over the self that allows us to dig deeper into other things.
Right.
And if our initial interactions then with the spirituality are things that are just whatever I feel like, I'm not going to gain that discipline.
Right. Yeah, I mean, of course I have thought about these things a long time myself, and it's always nice to hear other people's input. And I think a great place to always start is with, of course, fundamentally language, right? You look at the word religion. I think, from what I recall, don't quote me, guys, but religio is Latin for like yoke or to bind together. Okay. So it's about bringing something together. Spiritus is Latin for all the things we already know spirit means. It's like life, it's spirit, it's, energy, force, self. And then take the word deen in Arabic, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it connected to the same root for dain, like a debt? So is that accurate?
Debt, and also, like recompense. Yom Ad-Din.
Right.
Malik Yom Ad-Din is the day of when all the debts are paid, basically.
Yeah. So the indebted is, you're being indebted to the fact that Allah gave you the gift of consciousness and life and a taste of His eternal attributes as a, package to work with in your own existence, right? Like so we're indebted to the fact that Allah gave us this. And I always say, like, imagine if I was super wealthy and I had, this awesome house in Malibu, and I was like, I'm always very generous with my friends. Just take the keys, go with your family, get away, have fun, and use the car, eat the food, there's cooks, and I'm giving you this huge amana of all this property and wealth and, great times, right? But you can also lose that amana with me and not fulfill the trust, right? And if you crash my Ferrari or burn my house down, you're going to be extremely indebted for the favor that I trusted you with, right? So that's just a simple human analogy. Imagine now the Creator, who's eternal, needs nothing, and chose to create you or me or Donald Trump, and we use our life to live in forgetfulness, heedlessness, or we align ourselves with the divine pattern, or we choose to actually rebel and go against it, right? And be part of the evil army. So, just those terms, and of course, ruh in Arabic is spirit and life force, and there's this tranquility and etc. So I think at least one of the ways I've kind of seen it, because I've gone through my own journey with religion, and this is that, perhaps religion is more about the collective emphasis of a worldview, and that requires communitarian or collective patterns and laws and transactions and formalities, and spirituality is more of the personal taste that you get out of that collective effort. In other words, religion is organized spirituality, but if we lose that sense that it is organized spirituality, then it can become politicized, institutionalized, whatever, and then it becomes kind of a different thing rather than what it was always meant to be. Because when I, for example, just reflect on the seerah, the first 11 years of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no 5 daily prayers, right? And then it came once they already had a lot of theology, purification of theology, social justice, change, right? And then the salah came to anchor them in their love of Allah and the Prophet and the iman that they had to keep it organized. The 5 daily prayers. Is that accurate?
Salah before that, but it was in the morning and the evening.
Did they do the actual sajda, like the same exact format, or was it do we have any knowledge about, was it meditation? Was it still a type of sajda, or?
I can't remember exactly, but I believe it was similar. But I'm not entirely sure. I would have to review. I can't remember right now.
Because Isra and Mi'raj happened at that point about, 10 years in, or was it earlier?
About 10, 11 years in.
And that's when we got the official formalization of the 5 daily prayers. Yeah. And then after
Jibreel came to him and taught him the salah before that.
Right.
And he taught Khadija radiallahu anha very early.
So it might have been even a private practice.
And they used to go out, and they say they used to go out to the outskirts of Mecca and pray in the morning and the evening, and try to not get caught, basically.
Wow.
But the 5 definitely comes later, and even if it's 2, I mean 2 is, it's organized still. That's an interesting breakdown: organized spirituality versus.
Because spirituality is, if you look at it with psychology, spiritual psychology, transpersonal, it's about, like you started off saying, it's about relating and developing meaning in relation to the bigger picture and beyond yourself and your ego, right? So whatever I'm doing, I am always part of this massive ocean of water that has its own current, but I'm also a part of it, So it's like, that's why you can have people practicing the same religion, but someone's at spirituality level 100 and the other is at negative 100, right. And the whole everything in between, even though they're practicing the same things or they're in the same gatherings. So doesn't that really suggest this subjective intention, psychological, effort, sincerity, and relationship that person actually has with the divine. Because it's like a toolkit, right?
There's something else going on inside.
Yeah. Because you're not going to get the same results for everybody. Right?
No, I mean, it's one of the most, I think, one of the statements that really sticks with me a lot is this statement of, I believe it was Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, but it's attributed to different people, that the people who came before you, they didn't reach what they reached because of praying a lot and fasting a lot and giving a lot in charity. Which is not to say that they didn't do a lot of those things, but they didn't reach what they reached with God through those things. They reached it through سخاء النفس والسلامة الصدر والنصح للأمة. That they had this generosity of spirit and cleanliness of heart, open-heartedness, like they don't hold anything against anyone, and that they give sincere advice to everyone. Those are all issues of the heart. In the end, they're not. So someone can be more sincere in that. Some people experience different levels of things in their hearts. But I think even, sometimes I wonder with spirituality and kind of how that fits into our tradition and just the terms. Because, in the end, in Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, Gabriel, the Hadith of Gabriel, when he comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he talks to him about Iman and Islam and Ihsan, belief, the 6 articles of faith he mentions, God, messengers, angels, Day of Judgment, so on. He mentions the acts of worship. And then he mentions worshipping God as if you see him. And even if you don't see him, you know that he sees you. And so the scholars have often said that these represent 3 major branches of Islamic studies, right? You have theology, and you have law, and you have spirituality. And all of those are deen.
Right.
All of those are the way. Another meaning of deen, by the way, has to do with kind of like how you do things. It's like, كَمَا تَدِينُ تُدَانُ. As you do to others, it will be done to you. So all of these fall into our relationship with God,
right?
Really, and so, but really, where things can where there's the space for such varying levels of experiences in the realm of the heart,
right? And I want to talk about the heart next, but just to close up this notion of spirituality, religion, also what came up for me is if spirituality is about transcending the ego, polishing the ego, purifying. In other words, I'm not going to resist transformation just because I want to stay comfortable within my own nafs as it is, right? I mean, if you think about it, that's purification of the heart, that's tazkiyat an-nafs, that's having akhlaq and adab. It's about aligning yourself to the way that the human being was meant to be, essentially,
absolutely.
Right? Because we know we can be either these gorgeous creatures or something much worse than even animals sometimes, right? Because animals don't have a choice to be what they are.
Best of the best or the worst of the worst.
SubhanAllah. So I mean, that's how I kind of see is like your spirituality. That's why there are people who can. Because one question I hear a lot, and maybe you've heard it too, is how come these people pray, or somebody in my family, or someone else, like mashallah, lihya, kufi bisallu, or hijab, or whatever, and backbiting, abuse, constant criticism and judgment. Weaponizing the religion to get kids to do what they want, whatever it is, right? You have to listen to me, you're going to go to hell. Or and of course, we know that not all of this is allowed naturally, right? But it's fascinating because it can be that test. Don't make us a test for those that come after us. Like if we, the point here is the ripple effects, the snowball effect of everything we do. Has so much more impact than we know, and I feel like that's definitely a principle of spirituality, right? The butterfly effect, as they say, it's like, so. But this is, to me, it's almost like it shows a rupture of one's psychology, and spirituality and religion, right? Because it's like religion is supposed to help in your spirituality. Your spirituality is going to naturally be it's the reflection of your psychology. So it's all going to influence each other. So does that suggest that your deen itself, or the way you're making meaning of it or practicing it, is lacking, and that's why it's not making that positive impact, or بتحسنك, improving you in your ihsan and your spirituality, psychology, akhlaq, right? Because isn't that supposed to naturally follow if that real nur of Allah and the hidayah of the Prophet ﷺ is impacting your heart?
Absolutely. I think rupture is a really good word. That's a really good word for that. I think in such cases, and of course there's varying levels that people struggle with different things. That's part of spirituality, right? Is that they'll make mistakes and they struggle and so on. But sometimes there truly is just a major rupture between the internal and the external. And I think that our guidance as relates to religion and spirituality and so on is to bring those two together, the internal and the external. So we have external rules and we have external practices, and they're supposed to be paired with internal realities.
Right.
So yeah, you can pray, but the prayer is supposed to be paired with this internal reality of concentration, of submission, of humility in front of God, of all of these type of things.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, then you're not going to get the result that is meant to be there. And that's, it's actually really clear in so much of the hadith. Because the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ will tell you things like, they don't believe if they don't love for their brother what they love for themselves.
Right.
They don't believe, let whoever believes in God in the last day speak well or remain silent. The signs of the hypocrite are the one who, if you get in an argument with them, they blow up. If they are given a trust, they break it. All of these are all character issues.
Yeah, signs, yeah.
They're all character issues. It's not like he didn't pray. Although
Right.
that's in different narrations as well.
Right.
But these are all part of the equation.
Yeah. So I mean, it almost sounds to me like it's fair to say that your character probably is going to suggest the most evidence as to your hal, perhaps. Regardless of what you're doing on the outside all the time. Right?
Yeah. They used to say that the person who's better than you in adab, in manners and character, is better than you in their spirituality. And some of the later scholars, they said, no, the entirety of the religion actually is manners and character.
Right.
If they're better than you in manners and character, they're better than you in the religion.
Interesting.
And who is the Prophet ﷺ other than the most beautiful person ever in character
inside and out.
manners? Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
So yeah, you have external rules, but those they're even if you look at, for example, the 5 pillars, right? Shahada to the side, but if you look at the prayer is tanha an al-fahsha'i wal munkar. It prevents from evil and bad deeds, right? The fasting is a means by which you gain taqwa. You gain this awareness and consciousness of God, which is, again, relates to character and manners. The zakat, the charity, is a means by which you're purified.
Tuzakki.
Yeah, tutahhirukum biha. That these are all there. The Hajj is a place where there's la rafata wa la fusuqa wa la jidala fil Hajj. There's no bad character, there's no arguing, there's no corruption in Hajj. So all of them actually go back to this idea of purifying one's character.
Yeah. It's like Shahada is about let go of falsehood and bear witness to the truth. Salah is about let go of evil deeds and, promote the good. Zakat is about purify your wealth and help the misfortuned. And Hajj is about let go of your tribalism and ethnocentrism and come together and remember the one source that we came and will return to. I mean, there's just so much wisdom,
there.
man. Yeah,
so much
SubhanAllah.
there.
And every time I have an interview with somebody, I'm learning new insights about the deen, like concept. It's just beautiful, man. It's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like there's no limit. And I feel like that's what should excite us. Like, let's seek the knowledge. Let's, take this path and do our best and trust that Allah is going to open the doors and help you understand things just because you desire it more than, watching 6 hours of Netflix every weekend or, making sure you're better than your sister or, your wife is hotter than your brother's or whatever ego,
Weirdo
garbage
stuff
and, stuff people are carrying, Allah guide us. So I'd love to turn in our last portion here to discussing a bit more about the heart as an organ of perception. This concept is central and integral to Islam, to ihsan, to Islamic psychology, and for some it might seem kind of still abstract. Like, how is the heart an organ of perception? How do because most of us feel like we are up here in our heads, like we're living behind these eyes and looking out through the windows right here, and so we always feel like we're kind of located up here, right? But we're not. I mean, being a Westerner, it's a lot more cerebral generally, so you're gonna feel more stuck there. But that's probably why a lot of people are also looking for those other integral practices and things, right? So can you tell us a bit more about how Allah talks about the heart in the Quran? I know there's different words. There's fu'ad, qalb, there's sidr, there's perhaps basira, I think, connected to the chest. So what are some of those terms and what do they indicate? Maybe you can start us off there with getting a ground of meaning.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, there are a lot of terms used, like you said. And they all relate to some sort of understanding that's happening inside. Like the ones you mentioned, there's sadr, which refers to the chest, technically speaking. There's qalb, that refers to the heart. There's fu'ad, that sometimes people will say refers to like the inner heart. There's the sir, that's even deeper than that, the secret that's deeper inside. There's the ruh, the spirit.
So there's these internal layers and depths that you're saying. Yeah.
But all of them in the end, the understanding is what you said, is that we don't only perceive with our minds. That's a really, really important concept in Islam. Yeah. And the big verse that's often quoted in that context is the verse about لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور. That it's not the eyes that go blind, rather it is the hearts and the chest that go blind.
SubhanAllah.
And that, and we realize that as a reality, that people, when, even on a practical day-to-day level, when the heart and the emotions are not in the right place, our perceptions all change.
Yeah.
We look at the same thing and see something completely different depending on what's going on with us internally. And so the idea is that when we are connected to God, that allows us to have, usually it will allow us to have more understanding of what's going on with ourselves internally, and we'll be able to understand things in a deeper way, in a more profound way.
Right.
And on top of that, maybe there's insights that the heart gets that the mind doesn't get.
Right.
And that's really tough, I think, for people to understand. But we're composed of a soul and of a body.
Yeah.
And sometimes the soul is getting information too. The Prophet ﷺ said, for example, "Taqu firasat al-mu'min li'annahu yanzuru bi nur Allah." That beware of the spiritual insight, I guess you could say, of the believer, because the believer is looking with the light of God.
SubhanAllah.
That they understand things. I mean, it's really hard to explain, but sometimes you experience it. You sit in front of someone and they say things, you're like,
He's looking through me.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like maybe in some colloquial terms, it's like listening to your gut, your intuition. We say things like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right," even though I have no rational explanation. I just don't feel comfortable around that person for some reason. Like, there's something you're picking up on. And when I was in grad school, I came across some research. There's an organization called the Heart Math Institute, which is actually located in California, and they focus on studying how the heart is an organ of perception scientifically. And one of the things that they've published was that they found approximately 50 or 60,000 neurons in the heart that communicate to the brain. And they also found that signals that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the other way around.
Interesting.
And that when the heart sends signals to the brain has to submit to its command. Whereas when the brain sends a command to the heart, it can actually not fulfill the signal or the the message being sent, right?
Like straight out of the revelation.
Yeah, like the brain might say, he's gonna take your wallet, freak out, and then it's telling the heart, increase heart rate, get adrenaline going, you're in danger, and then the heart's like, no, I know this guy, or no, relax, okay? Make excuses for him or something, right? And there's a lot of stories like this, but this this Heart Math Institute, and here's one of the main ones maybe that'll help people really see this, besides kind of personal anecdotes, is the research shows, I think it was at least 100 people that they did this with. So picture, you bring in random people, you look at a screen, you're told you're going to see random images appear every 3 seconds. Some are going to be pleasant, like gardens and moms kissing their gorgeous kids or what have you, and there's going to be ones that are very unpleasant, like a tiger eating out another animal's carcass, or somebody who's disheveled, or an accident or something, right? The point here is that it's random from beauty to ugliness. And what they found, they're measuring the heart's response, like the different waves and electromagnetic energy that it releases, which signifies activity. So what they found was, you're staring at the screen, and the first image that comes up is like flowers, and your heart responds to beauty, right? And the more smooth your heart waves are, the more tranquil you are, and the more chaotic they are, the more you feel chaotic. That's why also when someone gets angry in a room, you feel the space change. So when they're looking at these pictures of these flowers, they found that like it switches. I'm at 1 Mississippi. By 2 Mississippi, my heart is going to chaos. And then by 3 Mississippi, the random image that comes next is something ugly and scary. In other words, they said, and this is still something everyone's scratching their heads around, the heart is perceiving things that's precognitive. In other words, they found, like, we're talking like almost 80% here, that every time your heart rate changed as if a negative image was about to come, it did. Even though it was randomly simulated. Like, even the experimenters didn't know what image is coming next. So they were suggesting that the human being is tapping into knowledge or awareness or understanding precognitive, and there's layers of reality clearly that it's not just in your neurological sensory input necessarily, right? So that's like actual scientific publishing. You can find it on Heart Math Institute, and they've done other stuff, since then too. Which is really kind of, when I first learned about it almost 10 years ago, I was like, subhanAllah, I immediately remembered the hadith of the Prophet about the heart, and of course the ayat in the Quran. So just thought I would drop that geeky footnote.
Oh, that's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially, like I've heard some people say, some scholars and stuff say, ideas of like the heart being the gateway to the soul. And the soul is old, right? Our souls are not, they're here way before our bodies are here. And our souls know God. And so part of it is to discipline ourselves enough such that we can actually hear our hearts. And that's like the first kind of like the foundation. This is usually where people stop in the spirituality of Islam. They call the whole thing tazkiyah, which is basically trying to purify the nafs enough, the soul, the base self enough, such that we can get past it and have some sort of relationship with the heart. But then now, what happens there? Now we're getting into a whole level of experience and existence that relates to being connected with the soul and everything that the soul knows.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I had done that, if I had accomplished that level, then I'd be able to maybe say more, but I haven't. But that's what I hear. Yeah. It's a very fascinating thing that you shared.
It's kind of like the mind can be almost like the inner chatter, and the heart is meant to be the inner voice, perhaps. Like there's that difference. Or another way I kind of thought about it was like the mind itself, the brain has 2 hemispheres, so like there's a pair there, and Allah says we create everything in pairs, and that's how we understand fundamentally reality, science, laws, hot and cold, the whole spectrum of properties in the world. And it's like maybe the mind is more meant to process duality and understand that aspect of reality, whereas maybe the heart is designed to perceive unicity, and oneness. And that's why you won't ever see that if you're only staying here and you never go down or whole, right? Perhaps because why does Allah say those things about the you may have seen and heard with these senses, but you're actually blind or deaf or whatever it is. You didn't
really perceive.
Right. So there is obviously something more there than just a pleasant allegory, right?
Yeah. There's something profoundly beautiful there, I think. I don't know how to talk about it, but that's really remarkable. SubhanAllah. There's something there for sure. Wow. The heart is really something.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up that research just to get an idea, to see more of what they've done.
Yeah, totally. I'll put some links in the description of the show. They have some YouTube videos and stuff too, and there's a TED Talk once with a guy from Heart Math, and he did a demonstration on stage about like showing the power of the heart. In other words, they're trying to show like the heart isn't just some Valentine's Day symbol that pumps blood and that's it. It's like no, actually, it's an amazing organ. It has a self-generating electrical pulse that pumps blood and cleans and does everything for you. I mean, if your blood wasn't flowing, you'd be finished, right? It's that life force. Everything comes from there, right? And there's nothing, to my knowledge, in the heart that there's a switch for it, right? Just like the brain. There's no region of the brain. There's regions of the brain that is responsible for learning and memory and, logical thinking and visual cortex in the back and, somatic movement, this and that. But there's no part of the brain that is specially designated for telling the rest of the brain what to do. right? There's no control center. It just does what it does. It gets stuff in and it sends it out. It does it. So what's telling the brain to do what it does, right? How is it choosing which signals or not to stop or block or send? And even down to the neurology of the brain, Sheikh Jamal, your neurons actually even organize efficiency in the biochemical signals being sent like every 1/100th of a second constantly. It actually has multiple options happening on a neurological level, and it'll be like, no, this neurotransmitter is most efficient for what the host that we're in right now is currently thinking. Like the subtlety of almost like micro complexity and awareness, I mean, to me, it just suggests like that ruh, right? There's this life force that's breathing life into everything, all your cells, everything that's doing its work. You're not telling it to do anything. You know, subhanAllah, it's doing all this stuff for you, the heart, and when it shuts down, you're finished. Just like that. I mean, it's just like a cosmic clock ticking in you. Amazing. You know, it's
that's so amazing.
And that's why I feel like when you really study the creation, you of course recognize more of the majesty of Allah.
Absolutely.
But if your whole life is you know, pop culture and the top, you know, 10 billboards and, you know, the latest you know, fashion and this and that, I'm not, you know, again, I'm not against enjoying your time from time to time, but we have to recognize the content that we fill our minds and brains with, the shows that we watch, the people we spend time with. It can rob you of perhaps the
of life itself.
Yeah, the point of experiencing this rich, deep experience. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be bliss. Right? No. That's very important, because some of us are obsessed with happiness all the time, which is to me the same as saying I want the whole world to be, you know, yellow or something. It's like you have to have all the colors and range of emotions to feel full life, right? Just like a meal isn't really a meal if it's just rice or just a chicken thigh. Like we always feel it's more complete when there's at least, you know,
there's some components.
Yeah, food groups, colors, even arrangements, right? It's like down to so many things, you know. We see these divine patterns constantly manifesting itself, right? So it's like...
And that's one of the... I mean, so when we talk... This takes us all the way back to the beginning, right? So what is it that integrates all of those differences? It's the existence of God.
SubhanAllah.
The accepting the existence of God as one, as the creator of everything, who out of his infinite unicity produced all of these, or created all of these different manifestations of his names and attributes, and so all of them, they have their own manifestations, but they all take you back to the creator. So there has to that unifying, that's what makes everything whole. But if you take all these pieces, you know, you just want to have a meal with rice or whatever, it's not, it ends up you're like, well, it doesn't taste right. Life
like,
doesn't taste right.
SubhanAllah. Life doesn't taste right.
And we're sitting here looking, at least on my side, I have this view of the hillside and different plants and flowers and some raindrops coming down and the sun coming from the other side and some clouds, and I'm just thinking about what you're saying. And all of the different types of trees and plants, and
I know
all of it is...
Like we could have had, for example, like as a species, you know, if we really just kind of evolved, natural selection is in charge, like, you know, why didn't nature just evolve like simple, like beige, no flavor fruits that have carb, protein, fiber, everything, and you just, that's all that there is, and we all just eat it to survive, right? And it's like, but yet somehow the earth created infinite herbs, you know, spices, fruits, vegetables, there's all kinds of livestock, animals, and then the whole sea and ocean, and then of course we see, of course, the cuisines and the colors and the culture and the music and the vibrations, and I mean, it's so gorgeous and beautiful, and it's like all of that was just a supreme miraculous accident, you know, or that we have a male and female. Why would nature evolve us into a male and female if it's all about survival, efficiency? You know, why would natural selection push that? Why weren't we, you know, asexual or reproductive on our own, or, you know, some pollination, you know, who knows? Because again, there's no conscious directing force here.
Right.
Even though natural selection contradicts itself, because it somehow knows what genes are good for your survival and not. And based on the mutations that help your survival and prosper, those stay, and the ones that don't, those people or creatures die out. So there is some kind of a relationship or awareness of what's helping this organism survive in the... So there must be some knowledge of the environment as well as the organism's mechanisms, but somehow it's a blind force that is naturally selecting and mutating for you. So yeah, it's just like, I feel like when you just, like Allah says, don't you? It's do you use your intellect?
Yeah.
Right? I mean...
أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ
أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ.
Do you not comprehend?
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like it's very hard to really start to see the ayat of Allah that, in my opinion, can be so clear and apparent if you're not peeling away the layers of yourself and reality. And this doesn't mean you only study, schools of fiqh and aqidah. No, I'm talking about all knowledge.
Yeah.
Is a reflection of Allah's majesty.
Allah is Allah. He was Allah before anything ever existed. And anything that came into existence is a manifestation of His names and attributes.
SubhanAllah.
So, finite manifestation of His names and attributes.
Do you think that's why Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, if I recall correctly, that you will find the face of God in the east and the west?
فَإِنَّمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. No matter where you turn, there is the face of God. Perhaps.
Like ma ma'na wajh, is it presence, countenance,
Yes.
But I mean the point is it leads to the same conclusion.
It leads to the same conclusion, which is wherever you turn, you should be finding God.
Exactly. A manifestation, a reflection, His qualities or powers manifesting, and that vision needs light, right, physically speaking, to see or perceive anything. Without light you have nothing. And if you don't have the nur of Allah, the light of God, then you're also, even though you can see with the lights on in here, you're actually not seeing further or deeper vision that penetrates beyond the organized matter that we call tables and trees and people.
And that's why light is such a prominent metaphor in spiritual language.
Totally.
Right? So there's, even the hadith that I said, beware of the inside of the believer because they look with the light of Allah.
Yeah.
Right? So there's the basar, the physical sight, it needs the light in order to see. And the basira, the insight, it needs the light of God and remembrance and worship and everything else to see and to comprehend. And if our insides are not animated by belief, then we're not able to perceive properly. And Allah is nuru samawati wal ard, either way. He's the light of the heavens and the earth, everything.
SubhanAllah.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing. Yeah, there's a lot there, isn't there?
Well, Sheikh Jamal, do you have any final comments or thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up this lovely and hopefully first of many discussions?
Inshallah. I don't know. One thing I always tell people on a very practical kind of takeaway is that in that hadith of Gabriel alayhi salam, when he comes and he tells those three things, that you have the theology and you have the outward practices and you have the spiritual practice. Basically, you have mental practices in theology, and you have physical practices in the law, and you have spiritual practices in ihsan, and tazkiyah, or whatever you want to call it. And all of those together are our way of doing things. So our way of doing things has to integrate all of these. I think that for the most part, Islam in the modern world has become a three-legged stool that has one leg, which is the leg of the outward and the leg of the sharia, without even theology or spirituality. And when you have a three-legged stool, only very few people can manage to maintain balance on a three-legged stool.
Right.
When you have two legs on the stool, some people, more people can maintain their balance. But when there's three legs, everything is strong and stable. And I think that it's important for us to begin to think about our way of life, which is Islam, in a way that embraces all three of those. And if we find that we're deficient in one or the other, then we can supplement it. And I think a lot of times when you find people who say, I don't want to have anything to do with religion, it's because they got beat over the head in one of those. One of those legs was removed from the stool.
Oh my God.
And used as a mechanism by which to beat the person.
SubhanAllah.
And so now they're like, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to figure it out myself.
Right.
And I don't really blame people for that.
Right,
because
of course.
I mean, that's
cause and effect.
That's actually not an unreasonable conclusion.
Right.
Right. They still believe in God a lot of times.
Right.
They just, I'm not going to do it this way. And so,
I'm just not going to follow this presentation of this version of organized religion or version. I mean, like one thing I always ask people, maybe next time I can start this off with you, is if Islam's the truth, then what is the true Islam? Because there's a lot of versions or Islams plural out there, right? Because there's people who are like, oh, Islam's nonsense and rubbish, and it's like, oh, tell me about your experience, and it's like this, and I'm like, wow. Well, if I went through that, I'd probably feel the same way, but that was a different facet or a different, an unjust expression of the tradition through the people that were around you, right?
Yeah. That's a really important conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to the statement of one of the shuyukh who said, when you talk to an atheist and they say they don't believe in God,
which God?
And you tell them that I don't believe in that God either.
Right.
Right. And when someone's, I don't want to have anything to do with Islam, well, what is that you don't want to have anything to do with? Because it's likely that I don't want to have anything to do with that either.
Right.
And so to come full circle again to the Majlis is one of the things that, at the most basic level, we just want to have an expression of Islam that's correct and true and pays attention to the environment that we're in and is beautiful and makes people better and they enjoy their lives. And if we can do that, then that's good enough. Whatever comes out of that comes out of that. But the basic foundation is people need to be able to have an experience with religion that is truly religion, which is that it should be beautiful and it should be inspiring and it should be encouraging and so on and so forth. Right. It will be difficult at times, yes, but it should still be beautiful.
No. Yeah. Beauty is found in places that aren't always pleasant or pleasurable or, subhanAllah.
There's a rap album, Life is a Beautiful Struggle.
Yeah.
It's not changing that it's a struggle.
Or 311. You remember 311? 311 song, Beautiful Disaster?
See, these kind
I've had a lot of those.
The paradoxes. Yeah. And the true reality of the religion, it's living in the paradoxes.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it. Yeah.
Exactly. SubhanAllah. Empowerment is from surrender. And there's so many. I know that I don't know. It's bittersweet, subhanAllah. But Sheikh Jamaal, it's been an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please support the Majlis, located in Southern California. Help Sheikh Jamaal serve his community. It's a lovely place, and if you are local, come check it out. I'll have a link for it in the show. And those of you who aren't local, please support it. And there's also live feeds of the seminars and classes that Sheikh Jamaal and his team provide. So make sure you check that out, inshallah, when you have the chance. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Jamaal. And inshallah, we'll see you again soon.
All right.
Love you for the sake of Allah,
Love you
buddy.
too. Appreciate you. Thank you for the chance.